commence our dars. There's again another janazah notice of Faisal Bolton. Inshallah, that will be after Isha Salah from Masjid Taqwa. To make dua, Allah grant the deceased Jannah to Firdaus. Grant sabr and contentment to the heart of the parents and the family, the wife and children. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. The janazah will be after Isha in Masjid Taqwa, proceeding to the Papa Kil Maqbara, inshallah. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وقدوتنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Respected brothers and sisters in Islam, firstly thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once again. Allah has granted us the tawfiq and the ability to perform Maghrieb Salaah wal Jama'ah. Alhamdulillah. Last week we discussed the author where he speaks about the condition how the believer's ruh is taken and the condition how the disbeliever's ruh is taken. And our Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions it. The believer sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes his ruh and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him a little discomfort at the time of death. Why? Because to wipe away the sins that might remain on him or to elevate the status of the person. And then says Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, on the other hand, we find that these believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the time of death, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make and relieve them a little bit at the time of death. So Allah will grant them an easier death as a recompense and the reward for the good that they used to do in this dunya. And after that, they will be taken to the fire of Jahannam. Allah protect us. So ultimately, we learn in the hadith and the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that when it comes to the believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will decide what will be the condition of how that person leaves this dunya and how easy and how difficult it will be. And so we ask Allah, we should always make dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make that easy for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us an easy death and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us a death without difficulty. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. If there is difficulty, may be a means of purification for us. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. And this evening, the author discusses in the chapter Hararatul Maut wa Mata Taskun. He discusses the heat of death and the pains of death and when will it subside? When will the pains of death subside? And he speaks and he starts off this chapter with the narration of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Ahmad narrates where Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Tahaddathu an Bani Israel." That narrate stories from the Bani Israel. فَإِنَّهُ كَانَ فِيهِمْ أَعَاجِبُ. That indeed in the stories of the Bani Israel we find many lessons and there are amazing stories we can learn and we can read. And then the author brings a narration from the Bani Israel where it is mentioned that خرج طائفة منهم فأتوا مقبرا من مقابرهم فقالوا that one day there was a group of them that was traveling and they came passed by one of the graveyards. And then they stopped at this graveyard and they says لو صلينا ركعتين ودعونا الله يخرج لنا بعض الأموات يخبرنا عن الموت. And they came up with the idea. They said, what if we perform some prayer in Salah at the Maqbara and we make dua unto Allah that Allah must bring and Allah must resurrect one of the deceased buried in this graveyard. Allah must bring about one of the people who is buried in this graveyard. So you can inform us regarding the condition in the grave. And so they performed the Salah and they made dua and they asked Allah to resurrect one of the amwat to give them a quick summary of what's happening in the grave, or what is the condition, what is his condition in his grave. And then the narration mentioned اطلع رجل أسود اللون. And suddenly a person appears from one of the graves, a dark-skinned person, says this narration, بين عينيه أثر السجود. And in between the two eyes there was almost like a mark of sujood. فقال يا هؤلاء ما أردتم إلي. And he started speaking and he said, you people, what is your problem? Why did you summons me? Why did you ask Allah to resurrect one of us? And then this person is giving now a quick summary of what happened to him. He says, لقد مت منذ 100 سنة that I've died 100 years ago. He says, I've died 100 years ago. فما سكنت عني حرارة الموت حتى الآن. He says, since the day I passed away, when I experienced the difficulty of death, until now, which is 100 years ago, the heat and the pains of death has not subsided yet until this moment. So after 100 years, only now, when Allah has now given me the ability to come and to inform me what's happening, this is the only time after 100 years that I've tasted some relief from the torment and the punishment in the grave. So the punishment of and the difficulty of death, my beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, according to this narration, it starts at death, it continues in the grave, and it doesn't stop. Imagine 100 years later, it's still going through torment and punishment in the grave. And a similar narration mentions, وَقَدْ مُتُّ مُنْذُ 80 سَنَةً. This person said, I've been buried there for 80 years. And he says, and yet I'm still feeling and still experiencing the heat of the grave, the difficulties of the grave. And then says another narration, أخرج أبو نعيم ونعيم عن كعب قال لا يذهب عن الميت ألم الموت ما دام في قبره. That indeed the pains and the difficulties of death, it continues with a person as long as he's in the grave. وإنه لأشد ما يمر على المؤمن وأهون ما يصيب الكافر. And then says Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam that indeed this punishment or the difficulty in the grave will be the most difficult thing the true believer experience. Meaning, what he experienced in his grave, it will be the most difficult experience in the afterlife. Because Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, if the person is in his grave, a true believer, he goes through that little bit of one narration mentioned, every person will be squeezed by the grave, almost like a welcoming squeeze. So whenever a Muslim goes through in the grave, says Rasul, says there's this narration, that will be the worst that can happen to him. After that, it will be ease. After that, it will become easy for him. But the punishment in the grave for the disbeliever, says narration, it will be the easiest thing that disbeliever experience. After that, it will get worse and worse. So the punishment in the grave and the torment in the grave, my beloved brothers and sisters, it is indeed a reality. When a person stands by the grave and we see our brothers and sisters being buried, and we make dua, for us it looks like a hole, we covered through sand in this hole, and that's the end of it. That's not the end of it. The moment the last footsteps of the person in the graveyard leaves, then all of it starts. All of it starts, and the punishment in the grave is a reality according to many narrations in the Quran, in the hadith of authentic hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some of the punishment Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions in one narration. It is mentioned Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that adna jabadat al-maut bimanzilati 100 darbatin bis-sayf. That the lightest punishment in the grave will be equal to 1,000 hits with a sword. So imagine if someone hit you 1,000 times, or 100 times rather with a sword, that will be the easier thing, easier than what you experience in the grave. That's why Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam always is to seek Allah's protection from the punishment in the grave. For the punishment in the grave is a reality. The punishment in the grave is a reality, and that's why we always make dua that Allah grant us to be successful in the grave, because Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if a person is successful in the grave, everything after that will be easy. If he passes the test, the questioning in the grave, and is shown his abode in Jannah from his grave, and he experiences the pleasures and the na'im and the gifts from Allah in the grave, then that person will enjoy the time spent in the grave. Allah will make it wide as the gardens of Jannah, compared to the one who will experience torment, where the hadith mentioned one person, he will be hit with a steel hammer between the eyes. Imagine with a steel hammer by the malaika. Authentic narration. He will scream so loud that the entire creation can hear, besides ins and jinn, besides us and the Jannat. If we are to hear the sound of the punishment in the grave and how the people is screaming out of pain, would have fainted and died at the spur of the moment when you hear the sound. Serpents the size of horses. Imagine scorpions the size of horses being appointed to bite and prick a person and sting that person until the day of resurrection. The grave squeezing, as the hadith mentioned, squeezing the person until his right side of his ribs penetrating to the left side of his ribs. Imagine the pain and the torment in the grave. So it is something, my beloved brothers and sisters, is how we cannot be unmindful about. We should always make dua that, oh Allah, grant us relief and grant those who of our parents who is passed on, Allah must grant them the relief, protection from the torment of the grave. Allah grant all our deceased family and friends, grant all of them protection from the punishment of the grave. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us as we sitting tonight, my beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, that when we leave and we are placed in our grave has become one of the gardens of Jannah. Allah protect us from the evil and the punishment of the grave. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us a tawfiq and understanding. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.